Today, my guest is Perry J. Hubbard.
Look at the house next door, or if you're in an apartment building, look at the hall and realize that behind all those doors, there are people who desperately need to know the truth.
Welcome to Heritage of Truth. Today, my guest is Perry J. Hubbard, Dr. Perry J. Hubbard.
Yeah, if you want to use that.
Well, it's you've earned it. And he has a book called Anchors and Action, Principles that Define How and Why You Do Missions. Now, generally, I don't like to ask this question, but I would like to know what prompted you to write this book.
In 2000, I was asked to move to South America to become the director of training for our Wesleyan churches there and help them develop their missions program. And so I began to develop training seminars about missions. And as I began to travel, I discovered very clearly that the anchors, the foundational principles and teaching that needed to occur before they could send anybody didn't exist. I mean, there's teaching in general about missions, but there is no foundational kind of teaching that would take them into the kind of commitments that were going to be necessary. Commitment to mission is not a simple thing. And if you're not anchored, when you start getting busy doing activity, you may be doing things that mean nothing or have counter results to what you're actually intending. So I developed a seminar all about these 12 principles that would help the church both anchor themselves and be effective in mission.
Okay. And why is missions important?
Well, actually, missions is so important that we wouldn't have this conversation right now if there wasn't missions. And there would be no future of the church without it. Whether it's a home mission event, you go across the street, or you help someone go around the world to a people who have never heard.
And there's another reason, because Jesus told us.
Well, yeah, the Bible is a mission book. God has always been coming to man, even from the day of the garden. God came to man to walk with him. When man failed, God even talked with Cain, trying to say, don't go down that road. We have generally refused to listen to his advice, but to make it very clear, he came again and then invited us to join us in going to everyone else.
Yeah, so it's interesting that he uses people to spread the gospel.
Actually, it's his only method.
Yeah, I know.
So
it's just interesting to me that he would choose us when we tend to be disobedient. We tend to be.
But when we get it right, it's amazing how effective a person who has learned the truth about God, understands their purpose and prioritizes their life according to those guidelines. The impact of that person's life is incredible.
Yes, and we've seen that many times throughout history. Where one Sunday school teacher might have influenced one young boy, and then he became.
Well, that's the story of Billy Graham.
Yeah.
One Sunday school teacher leading one boy to the Lord, who then impacted a world.
Yeah. So isn't it amazing? So what we do when we're doing God's will can have great effects, great ramifications. So you have been a missionary in how many places?
Well, 26 years. We started in Sierra Leone, West Africa. Because of the rebel war, they came into our village, burned our house down, so we couldn't go back. And they got moved to Papua New Guinea. And then we're asked to come to South America, first to Guyana, then Costa Rica, and now we're in Panama, to help with this plan of developing missions in the region.
And do you speak a lot of languages?
3, besides English.
Wow, so that's 4.
Well, okay, 4. Yeah. Technical about it, yes, it's 4.
No, I just think that's really neat that you speak 4 languages. Well, the first several chapters in this book talks about truth.
Well, and that is the foundational point. If you start with the wrong truth, the rest of it's all messed up. Don't matter how good it looks or sounds. If you don't know where you're getting your truth from, it will affect everything else you do. And that's part of what the world is trying to teach us nowadays. As long as you're a good person and you do the right thing and you have some truth guiding you, it's all right. And that's all wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, of course, in our culture, truth is relative, which isn't true.
If you live in a world without God, then that's all you can hope for, which means every time a person meets, you in a sense don't have a clue of where the conversation could go or where the relationship could go and the outcome of it, because each person could live their life on a totally different line of truth. But if you have God in the universe, then we have a source that we can depend on that will not alter and vary, and leaves us with a very solid base to work from.
Mm-hmm. Well, we hear truth, we soak it in, and we repeat it. What if we get it wrong? What happens then?
Well, if you're one who accepts the truth of God, then we're in big trouble. Because the person who gets it wrong is going to pay dearly for that missed event. And the Bible's pretty harsh on people who disseminate false truth. And Jesus' comment was, if you mislead a child, better that they take a stone, big one, tie it around your head and toss you into whatever deep body of water is nearby before you seriously damage anybody else.
Yeah.
So hence the reason for such a focus on truth.
Right. Well, if a person's thinking about going into the mission field, what kind of preparation should they make?
Well, that's a lifetime preparation, because even when I look at my own life, while I felt called to mission at the age of 10, I didn't actually go until I was 34. But I realized as I look back all over that almost 30 years, that was all preparation. Preparing me to be ready to be called, preparing me to go, preparing me to be able to teach and train. I had filled out the application. They said, wait 3 more years. And when I look back at those 3 years, those were critical 3 years in my ability to adequately communicate my faith and to train others to do the same thing. Because a big part of our ministry has been training pastors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you talk about anchors. What are the anchors?
Okay, truth is the first one.
Okay.
Then your purpose, because that's based on your truth. Then out of there, you make your decisions about your priorities. Those define your relationships, and the word we use in here for relationships is holiness, which is, God is defined as holy, and we're called to be holy, and that's the key relationship. Mm-hmm. And then out of there, we have to define our residence. Where are we living? And those decisions all kind of work together to create a foundation of kind of a reality that we can live in to then take action from.
Okay. And the action is the missions?
Well, there are many pieces to action. That's equipping and training and leadership and prayer, and actually the final action is worship. Mm-hmm. When it all comes together, we worship God, and that worship gives us the energy, direction to share what we have done and learned with others, so they can be drawn into that same experience.
Mm-hmm. And worship also helps us with our relationship with the Lord and our intimacy with Him. Right.
We have the opportunity to express that and then receive back from the Lord His expression of His love for us in a group setting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really neat. So, in the chapter Missions, Refining Our Purpose, you say that how we define our purpose impacts our decisions in relation to levels of influence. You add that whether we accept or reject the direction of a nation, community, or family depends on where God fits in defining our purpose. So what things help define our purpose?
The world has its own set of realities. As an individual, you make decisions that determine, what I want. That's the big word, what I want. We mix that up with need. But that's also influenced by what your family wants from you and how they would define your purpose. There are some families, they spend a lifetime of money to get their child trained to a certain level. Mm-hmm. a community will do that too. They will help define and restrict what you can or can't do, and the nation does the same thing. When God is not part of that, then those tend to be selfishly defined to protect who I am, who they are, or who we are as a group. When we bring God into the perspective, it's kind of the difference between a passage from one of the Psalms. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. So many times we cut out the first phrase to say, God will give me the desires of my heart. Now we're in trouble, because now our purpose is being defined by me. Mm-hmm. But if we go back to delight myself in the Lord, that is a whole purpose definition statement. When my delight is in the Lord, all of my desires and wants become redefined, which means my purpose gets redefined, which means what my family is after will have to be redefined, because I can't accomplish what maybe my family wants. I have to see it in light of what God and how it will delight God. And then the community, how will my purpose and activity delight, bring pleasure to God in my community, in the same way in my nation.
Mm-hmm. So do you have a family that went with you on the mission trips?
Yeah, I'm married, I have 3 children.
3 children?
The youngest was born in West Africa, so she calls herself an African by birth. Confuses a lot of people.
That's funny. So are they, what ages are they now?
Oh, they're all grown. The youngest just signed a contract. They're all teachers, if you imagine that, in specialty areas. So, yeah, since we've been missionaries for 26 years, they went when they were children or born there and have grown up on the mission field, and now are walking with the Lord here in the U.S.
That's great. And are you located here now?
No, only temporarily. My wife Nancy and I are still serving as missionaries, and we are under appointment to return to Panama as soon as we resolve a couple things. Okay. So, yeah, we're going back another 3 years.
Okay. And so, what would you say has been the most rewarding thing for you being a missionary?
When I see the lights go on. When you're teaching students, material can be dry. And the goal is that at some point along the way, the material will become more than a textbook, more than another study sheet, another assignment, and the light goes on, and they see that the more they know about God and His Word, the more they can be effective in their ministry. And so when that light goes on, it's really quite exciting to see, wow, instead of just doing the assignment to make the teacher happy, they say, this is about me and God and accomplishing something pretty incredible.
Wow.
And I like that. I like to see the light go on.
That's great. The light go on, and it's when you're being a light to the world.
And sometimes it takes more time than
world.
others. Sometimes the light's already on, and you just get the joy of nourishing it.
That's great. Well, when you're in the States, is it an adjustment after being in other countries?
Less so now than it used to be. Our first term out, we went to the bush and disappeared basically for 3 years and had minimal contact with any U.S. culture. Now, between media and Skype and all these things, we maintain a pretty broad awareness of what's going on. Although when you do come back, it's more than you realize. So there is major adjustments that go on, but that's no different than when we leave the U.S. and go to another culture. Culture is adjustment. No matter whether you're coming home or going out, you have to be prepared to always adjust to what's happening.
And as a missionary, well, actually, all Christians are called to be missionaries to wherever we are, to our culture and that kind of thing. Do you have some recommendations that you can give, either based on your book or just your experience, to people who aren't going to have the chance to go to the foreign mission field, but ways for them to fulfill the Great Commission?
That's very simple, actually. The Great Commission is a 4-part thing. It's go to your neighbor, the people around your community, the people you're uncomfortable with, those Samaritans, and then the world. And so we have actually the opportunity to become involved at multiple levels, sometimes more extensively. But the first thing is look outside your window. Look at the house next door, or if you're in an apartment building, look at the hall and realize that behind all those doors, there are people who desperately need to know the truth. And then start thinking about what little thing you can do. It's not always about big stuff. Sometimes, we had a neighbor in Guyana, and I used him, and he was a taxi driver, and I always used him to take us places. I had him take me to church one time. He stayed for church and accepted the Lord. I mean, the potential is out there. Sometimes we create the wrong image of what it takes to do it. Bake a plate of cookies and take them to your neighbor. Mow their grass when you're mowing yours, or a piece of it. What'd you do that for? Well, I had my mower out and it just felt good. I don't know. Look at the possibility and get to know the person next to you, and begin to wonder, what can I do to make a difference in their life? Whether it's a simple thing of saying hello, or maybe something more important, more complicated.
And sometimes when you develop those relationships, it opens the door to the deeper things of God, the conversations where we can talk about the real issues of life.
Yeah. It's always realizing that it's not going to happen on the first attempt. Missionaries learn that very quickly. We spend years learning language, years learning culture, hoping for the day when that door will open. And it's amazing, if you spend the time and the energy, and you're patient in it, the door will open.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to see when God does that kind of work through you, and it's so rewarding, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, it is. Well, I want to know where people can find you online. Do you have a website?
Well, we have a website, perrynancy.us.
Perry Nancy?
Yeah, it's me and my wife.
.us.
Yeah, perrynancy.us.
That's good. That's good.
So you can find out more about us, and you can find the book in many bookstores and through Deep River Books.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, thank you so much for being our guest. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the chance to share a little bit about missions.
And God bless your work.